This has been such a challenging time for our community throughout the coronavirus pandemic. So much has changed in the way we communicate, the way we behave, the way we function as a community. But there are still important decisions that are being made at the city government level. And the response to the pandemic is paramount among those decisions. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for you to connect with your elected officials and for them to connect with you. Welcome to Ward Updates, a series of one-on-one interviews with Ottawa City Councillors. We're going to talk about the issues arising from this crisis that directly affect you, your families, and your neighbors. We'll share the stories of people throughout the city who have been rising to the occasion to help others, and we'll talk about other important issues that are happening at City Hall because the business of city government is continuing throughout this pandemic. My guest today is Tim Tierney, the City Councillor for Ward 11, Beacon Hill-Cyrville. Tim, welcome.
Great, thanks for having me on today, Mark.
And first of all, let me ask you how you and your family are doing and how you've been coping through this crisis as so much has been changed in our lives.
Yeah, you're quite right. I think, we're in week 24, and I remember it clear as day when we were standing at City Hall and Dr. Barrett Etches said, we're going into what will be a pandemic. And life changed very quickly. We learned to adapt. On a family front, staying very much in our bubbles, not mixing with other people and following the rules has been a bit of a challenge. But certainly we've adapted. I've had to convert rooms into our home just for doing business day to day, as well as even the employees that work for Ward 11, having to get them all outfitted to be able to work from a home environment. But we've learned to adapt. And this is the new norm for a little while, so we have to be quite used to it.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your space there, because I can see some toy construction equipment behind you, some mini shopping carts. Where are you working out of?
Yeah, so this is actually my wife's shoe closet originally, and it's now been converted into my home office. But as a transportation chair, I thought I'd add a little flair and fun with some items that are part of the transportation realm. Yes, the shopping carts. Remember the magical shopping cart bylaw I passed in the day, as well as you see some graders and plows and things, but it's a good backdrop.
Okay. And are your wife's shoes okay, Tim? Have they found a new home?
Well, let's face it, there's no shoes to wear anywhere these days, so they're all put away until the pandemic is over.
Right. All right. So let's talk about the pandemic and how it has impacted your constituents. Give me a sense of what's happening in your community, how people are responding, what some of the issues have been.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right. Life has changed in a big way. So typically in a councillor's world, in my office, we'll see about 2 to 250 emails per day on average, just about a range of issues related to potholes and light bulbs. Now it's more closer to 350 because it's not related to potholes and light bulbs. It's people that are very concerned about their CERB, or now they're unemployed, or they're looking for questions to be answered. Can I do this? Can I do that? So the world has changed. And even though there's certain elements that are not within the municipal jurisdiction, we've saw amongst ourselves in the Ottawa-Vanier riding, as soon as the pandemic started, I contacted Minister Fortier, MPP Lucille Collard, as well as Matt Fleury and Ralston King. And we meet every single week by Zoom so we can connect, figure out what the issues are, and make people get connected quicker with their level of government that needs them most. So that was a big change, and I think that's what I'm recognizing is it's a lot of mental health issues too. It's very concerning because being in your home for so long, you tend to get cabin fever, especially if you have young ones. I'm lucky I don't have young kids anymore, but that's what I'm seeing today.
And what have you seen in terms of the community's response? There are obviously some great stories throughout the city of people who have risen to the occasion, people who are helping others. Tell me a little bit about what you've witnessed.
Oh, I see it all the time. A good example, just up the street from me, Rihanna Prasad, a young lady that graduated, well, let's face it, didn't even have a real ceremony, but took the time and energy to collect some of her friends. We went out, we rented a 5-ton U-Haul truck, and she wanted to do a bottle drive so she could raise money for Youth Services Bureau and Black youth. And we filled that truck. I believe at the end of the day, it was pretty close to $4,000 that was donated out of that kind of thing. Other silver lining stories related to, we had a lady, Michelle Turner, in the community. During the pandemic, she got to ring the bell. She's cancer free. When she came home, to her surprise, socially distanced on the street, almost the whole neighborhood was out clapping and ringing bells when she pulled into our laneway. So there are some silver linings in this. It's not all doom and gloom, but we definitely have to reinvent how we do things.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. What needs to change going forward, do you think? What are some of the lasting implications from what we've been going through over the last 6 months?
Yeah, well, obviously in the short term, and you see plexiglass sales are through the roof, and I foresee that's going to be the case for quite a while. Most experts are saying it could be over a year before we even turn the corner that way. We've seen many changes at City Hall, even though we're not going back until September physically, if we do go back. They've installed plexiglass between all the seats around the council horseshoe. Obviously, hand washing. Wow, like whoever thought hand washing would be such a big deal? It is. And I think you're going to see a permanent installation of touchless hand washing stations in many city facilities. You're also going to see a lot more screening and diligence when it comes to, in my office, if anyone ever felt sick in the past, I always said, stay home because I don't want it. That's going to be true, I think, across the board now, is to ensure people really try to prevent the spread of many germs. And what we're seeing worldwide right now is we're watching, it's supposed to be flu season. Well, are we going to have the flu? Maybe all this hand washing is going to help us out just a little bit. But yeah, the world has definitely changed in the way of keeping hygiene.
And what's your sense of how permanent some of these changes are? What things are going to go back to normal? What things do you think are permanently altered?
Yeah, I speak to a lot of council colleagues because of my position with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and we actually were discussing this just in a offline discussion. And I think, with the exception of all the hand washing I mentioned, all those great things, that's here forever. But the plexiglass shields and the social separation, until a vaccine is here, that's going to be here in, I want to say, the medium to short term, so a year to 2 years, and we're planning just as such. So I think in 2 years out, maybe we can get rid of those plexiglass shields and get back to concerts and large gatherings, but until we actually get by this, I don't see a big change coming.
Let's talk about transportation. You're the chair of the Transportation Committee, and obviously we've seen dramatically altered transportation patterns during this pandemic. Let's talk about the current state, and then we can talk maybe about what the future implications are. But what impact has this had? Obviously it's alleviated a lot of traffic, it's alleviated a lot of pressure, the fact that people aren't moving around as much. What have you seen? What have you observed?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And we talk about this on a regular basis with our transportation traffic staff. The patterns certainly have changed. Downtown, it would usually typically take half an hour if you're in an automobile driving down there. You're down there in 10 minutes during rush hour these days. People are definitely staying in their local communities quite a bit more. That being said, speeding is definitely the number one concern. It's always been the number one concern in councillors' offices, but now it's more so than ever. And I make no bones about it. I have no time for speeders. It's a lot more children and families and cyclists on the streets these days. So we have to be really aware of that. And you probably saw that the province allowed municipalities a pilot project for speed radar in front of schools, designated schools. We have 8 zones in our city of Ottawa, and those cameras are on. So, don't speed. And some people are always asking, why? Well, what's the speed limit? What's the threshold? Well, the province doesn't even tell us. And their response essentially is, it's not a suggested posted speed, it's a law, so don't speed. So if people start speeding by those cameras, and I've already heard from a few, they're embarrassed to say what speed they went by at. They're just more unhappy they're getting hit in the pocketbook for those kind of things. But definitely, to your point, Mark, speeding, a lot more local families out on streets, and cyclists is a major concern, and we have to adapt.
So are we going to see more of that? Do you think there will be, this is a pilot project, obviously, but if it were up to you, would we have more cameras on streets catching speeders in the city of Ottawa?
Look, I remember back in the Harris days, and the difference between the Mike Harris days when they did, or Mike Harris came in and removed it actually, when they did photo radar, it was a mobile van and it was on a 400 series highway, and it was, in my mind, a bit of a tax grab. This is actually right in front of schools. There's no demerit points, obviously, and but it will hit you in the pocketbook. I want to see the results, though. If we don't see a decrease in speeding and it's just collecting cash, and by the way, the cash doesn't go back into general revenues, it goes back into traffic safety, traffic calming, if they have to redesign intersections to make it better for our pedestrians and cyclists. So it's not going into the general coffers. Some people say that that's not the case. It's all about making our streets safer, and we'll wait and see at the end of this pilot how that looks.
Just while we're talking about that, those cameras are only one aspect of a number of different things the city has been doing to try to make roads safer. So give us an update on that. I know there have been a lot of measures that have been put in place. You know, there are things to protect cyclists, things to make it harder to drive fast down some residential roads. So give us an update on that, and what's your sense of how well that's working, or do we even know yet?
Yeah, you know, Mark, we actually have, as ward councillors, we do have a small traffic calming budget that we can use every year. I take pride and I spend every dime that I get every year, and I'm typically the highest spender in that category. You're right. They'll put up things like speed boards in your community. And I know people see those blinking and think, oh, well, who cares? No, that data actually goes up to the cloud, and we can pull reports. And I have about, I think, 20 of those speed boards through the neighborhood. And when I notice a uptick in any kind of speeding, I provide that information to the police, because even though I'm a councillor, we can't direct police. We can't pick up the phone and say, can you come out and issue some tickets? We need supporting data. That's one of the elements that's out in communities, and it's definitely helping slow people down in areas. The other is these, you see the side of the road, they have the sticks, and they also have the ones in the middle of the road. They seem to work on residential streets or in front of schools. So we're still going through what are some of these new tools in our toolbox, but the speed boards amongst all councils is probably their favorite tool, because it gives them the opportunity to identify if there is speeding and to get the police out there to action.
All right, so let's pivot back to the issue of the coronavirus pandemic and what that means. As we've talked about, it's alleviated a lot of pressure on the roads. When things start to get back to normal, when people start going downtown more often to go to their work or to do other things, when people are traveling more, I think we've already seen an increase in traffic even recently. But when all of those things start going back to normal, do you worry about whether people will take public transit, for example, because they might be afraid of being around other people, so they'll be more likely to drive downtown? What's your sense of that and the pressure that might put on our roads?
Absolutely, and that's a good point. Is I do have that fear. Let's face it, till there's a vaccine, a lot of people will have that fear. There's a lot of people that also won't put their children on a school bus. So that's the additional traffic going to local schools in the neighborhood. So it is a concern for sure, and we're just going to have to ride this one out. I think we have some great leadership in Dr. Vera Etchis here giving us guidance and trying to reassure the public how things are going. They put a heck of a lot of measures in, from PPE and different items within our transit nodes and especially the LRT stations. But we do still continually see people contracting the coronavirus as operators as well. So, you know, we're doing our best. And until there's a vaccine, that is going to be a troublesome situation. We've identified it from a budgetary perspective because, of course, we try to get money out of the cash box on those buses to be able to offset costs on transit. So that is a concern, and we have to really adapt for that, at least for the foreseeable future.
So what can we do about that? Or are we just going to have to put up with more traffic on the roads? Is that just an inevitable consequence of the fact that people are not going to take public transit, or as you say, they're going to be more likely to drive their kids to school because they're uncomfortable putting them on school buses?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, and this is just my opinion, but based on some of the stuff, we're trying to predict here, but we are in a federal government town, which actually bodes well for us. You've heard, from a municipal point of view, your city has been told essentially to stay home to the end of the year. The federal government, my understanding, the last time they said end of January, but that will get extended. So a lot of people are actually going to stay at home. They're not going to be riding the highways, but it will be a lot more localized traffic, and that is a bit of a concern. That being said, those federal government workers that typically may have driven downtown, they're not. They're staying at home in their bedroom doing their meetings. So I think all in all, will the traffic levels go back to where they were or higher? I don't see that. I think there's still going to be a good segment of the population, especially federally and definitely from the city's perspective. Remember, we have 14,000 employees in the city, and there's quite a few of them that are at home now. That's a lot less people on the roadways.
All right, let's talk about light rail. You and many other members of City Council were big proponents of light rail, talking about it as a game-changing moment for the city. There was, let's acknowledge it, a lot of hype around the launch of Phase 1, and the first year of the Confederation line has not gone well, to say the least. Let me ask you first, do you regret anything about how City Council handled Phase 1? Do you regret how much the city was promoting this before it was launched, only to have a bunch of delays and then issues once the service was launched?
Yeah, I don't have any regrets based on the information City Council was provided. The decisions were pretty clear and pretty simple. My big concern is, I don't want to say scope creep, but when they should have identified the issues earlier, and hindsight's 2020. I think if you look at where we are today versus back even 6 months ago, at the start of the pandemic, it's night and day. It took lawyers essentially to be able to force RTG's hand to do the work and make the operation work correctly. I don't want to jinx anything, but now we have the 15 trains. They're running, every 3 or 4 minutes. You're going to get on a train. But that required them changing the catenary system on the overhead wires. That required them to install heaters that are gas, not electric, to be able to control the switching of the tracks. The circuit boards were popping just all the time. So all these issues had to be addressed. It looks like we're in the right direction, which is good news because, of course, Stage 2 is I think truly Stage 2 is the bigger part of the puzzle, and it's affecting home prices and transportation patterns in the future for the city of Ottawa.
So what's your level of confidence now about Phase 1? Because this has been a long road. It's been a tough year. I think there have been moments where people have wondered about the viability and whether some of these issues were so pervasive that it would be difficult to overcome them. Do you have confidence that we can get the first phase of light rail operating the way it was intended?
Yeah, I believe that will be the case. The real test is going to be when it's 40 below and we have 20 centimeters on the ground. So until we get to that point, so they've had a couple of winters under their belt, I won't believe it. And don't think for 2 seconds, City Council hasn't had hard discussions in camera about pulling the plug on these characters because, frankly, they weren't doing the job. They've made some great strides since by separating RTM and RTG. They've have a new head of the operation, and we've seen pretty dramatic changes on how they're dealing with issues. That being said, I think the pandemic, they should thank the pandemic. It gave the opportunity for lower ridership levels to be able to address some of the issues and shut down the line for a couple days here, a couple days there, to be able to replace many of those major components that you couldn't do in a regular business cycle. So I'm pretty excited about it. Stage 2 is marching along very well. If you're in the east end of the city, you're very familiar with all the stations. I get a new station at Montreal Road Station, and the housing prices, Mark, I don't even have to tell you about it. If you live within a kilometer from a station, your house value is going through the roof right now, and people are gobbling up those homes in anticipation for stage 2 light rail.
So what's your, excuse me, what's your level of confidence about stage 2? And what should the public's level of confidence be about stage 2? Is it a different ballgame, or is there the risk that some of the issues we saw with the first phase are going to come into play with this next one?
Yeah, no, actually, it's stage 2, oddly enough, is a lot easier because the electronics, the door switches, the trains, they're all part of stage 1. So literally it's laying track, and now they've learned about the catenary system issue in stage 1. They re-engineered it and modified it, so it's being used for all 3 segments of stage 2. Remember, these trains were also bought with the understanding that they can go up to 100 kilometers an hour. So when you start getting outside the green belt, where you need to pick up a bit of speed so you can get to the next stop a little bit quicker, that's the little tweaks that they're going to have to play with on the timings. But all being said, the major hiccups, and as they learn through stage 1, all best practices are being applied. And they brought on some pretty big specialists from overseas now that are working on stage 2 very heavily, or at least remotely right now. And these people are going to make sure that stage 2 goes far better than stage 1. And we're still 3.5 years away from stage 2 at my station. But every day we see the construction going on. They're ready to lay tracks in the center of the road soon and put the flyover. So construction is going full speed ahead.
All right, let's talk about the city budget for a moment, because you've got a $192 million shortfall as a result of everything that's happened during the coronavirus pandemic. A big part of that, of course, is the drop in transit fares. You're getting some money from other levels of government, but what kind of a threat does this pose to the city's finances, and what will be needed, what needs to be done to fix it? Will there have to be cuts going forward or tax increases?
Well, we discovered from our city treasurer in a city manager update that, yes, you're correct. We're about $192 million that is required if we want to hold to Mayor Watson's commitment of a 3% tax increase. If we didn't have that, there was a lot of talk amongst municipalities in Ontario of possible double-digit tax increases to make up for the shortfall, because we don't have any other tools. As you know, we're not allowed to run debt. That being said, we're very happy that the feds and the Prime Minister, as well as the Premier Ford, are playing nice with each other and playing nice with us. And we've received $126 million of that 192. So we feel very comfortable that there's actually another injection of cash coming before November, when we get down to brass taxes, pardon the pun, and start talking about what that tax rate's going to look like. And I'll tell you right now, I hate to use the term belt tightening, but there's a lot of efficiencies that we still keep working on, trying to get that number down so we won't have to go over a 3% tax increase. I'm feeling very confident that's going to be the case based on the support from the federal and provincial government.
So what kind of belt tightening are you talking about? And if there are inefficiencies at City Hall, why have they not been achieved in the past? Why are there still, after many of you have been council for a while now, why have those efficiencies not been achieved previously?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of them are directly related to the pandemic. So, of course, when you have to go out and hire multiple part-time people for positions for camps or whatever the case may be, we're not doing a lot of that anymore. It's very unfortunate. There's a lot of seasonal work that also takes place, and that doesn't have to happen now. So all these, and they're pandemic related. Will they return post-vaccine? Yeah, we want to serve our constituents the best way we can, but unfortunately we can't run all the programming that we typically would right now. The other issues that were, I think you've heard some of them. You've identified transit, but of course now we're losing out a lot of recreational monies as well. But at the same time, if you're not having to fire up the ice plants, because to many, hockey market in that world, ice production is very expensive in many arenas. So if you're not having to go through the process of creating ice and firing up all the rinks, that changes the expenditure side of the column as well. So these are all the things that our city treasurer has been looking very closely at, and we hope that we see that final injection of cash, and we can come back to the public and say, we're going 3%, don't worry, we're still going ahead with a lot of the things that we need to have done, like roads, and that's where it's at right now.
You have served on the Police Services Board. What's your sense of this moment that we're having now in North America about policing, Black Lives Matter, and some calls to defund the police, or at least stream some of the funding towards other things like mental health services? What do you think we need to do?
I've always been a big supporter of mental health services. I've always made mention of that even when I was on the police board. What's changed now is people are actually listening. I would never say defund. That's a weird word, and I don't think that was the intention of the word. But it was definitely to say, could money be moved around to be able to help people rather than incarcerate people? And we've had very great conversations with Chief Slowly. As a matter of fact, I have another one next week about some of the thoughts. One question I asked him on a call with Minister Fortier, myself, and my other council colleagues from the East End and Ottawa Vanier. I said, what would you, if you had the choice, would you get body cameras or Bearcats? And if you don't know what a Bearcat is, it's a giant tank-looking kind of thing with a turret on the top. We do have one. It's used for certain situations, but I asked him that, and his answer is very clear. He would be going body cameras over Bearcats. He won't be buying a Bearcat in his tenure as chief of this city. And that's good news, because I think making it a more friendly environment with policing is what we need.
All right. Tim Tierney, thank you very much for joining us today. Good luck to you and your constituents as we continue to move our way through this coronavirus pandemic. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Tim Tierney, the City Councillor for Beacon Hill-Cyrville. And that concludes our ward update for today. Thank you for watching.